boys don't want to be at home, boys will not read material for girls, and that they're easiest to get to movie theaters, or the easiest to get to bookstores. So comics, I think, are just a byproduct of that larger entertainment circle. They're made for boys, they're generated mostly by boys, the themes are very boy-driven, and when I use these terms, I'm talking very generally, like very sort of male, female, masculine, feminine, boy, girl. It's very general, but you get to get the idea that comics culturally here are a boy-driven medium. I actually think that's one of the big problems, and it's one that you need political and economic will to conquer, and I'm not sure how much of that there is. And again, partly it's a sort of it's like a circle, because for decades, most boys have mostly bought comics. Well, now if you want girls to get in to expand the market, now you're going to have to change the product, but the product is so geared to one group, so if you start changing the product, then that group starts to disintegrate and go away. And so it's just this weird upheaval. And I think, again, I think there are, for example, I've often said Wonder Woman would sell if you didn't try to sell her to boys. If you didn't try to sell her to the current comic market, if you allowed her to be what that character was invented to be, and found ways to distribute that comic and that character through other avenues and other venues, I think she would sell phenomenally. But because the core is this group of 35 to 40-year-old men whose buying habits were established 20 years ago, who are very unlikely to suddenly go, oh, this is fantastic, to sort of open their minds. As most people, the reason young people are desired as as an advertising pool is because they haven't made up their brand decisions yet. By the time we're 35, you're going to buy a certain kind of detergent, you're going to buy a certain kind of car, you're going to buy a certain kind of comic. So to try to get a Wonder Woman comic targeted to a 40-year-old who's never going to buy Wonder Woman anyway, it's just sort of, it's backwards thinking to me. And I would rather create a whole line of comics, for example, for 10-year-old girls, using female creators, or however you want to do it, and distribute them in a new way to their target audience. But again, you need political and economic will, and I'm not sure the publishing right now that exists.
I've been getting the Young Justice, because there's kind of a mix, and it's kind of good for both of them. I'm kind of curious, have you seen any of the issues for the new Teen Titans? After the relaunch?
You mean the relaunch?
Yeah, I'm just
I
curious.
personally have only seen that. Just looking at the cover, I would suggest that that is inappropriate for most teenagers, actually. Keeping in mind that that relaunch, as I understand it, is in many ways about regaining the readers of the 90s, and getting them interested in comics again by showing them imagery that reminds them of the comics they read when they were, in the 90s. However, my guess is that target audience are going to be in their late 20s, early 30s, because the 90s were 15 years ago. So if they were 15 when they were reading those books, they're 30 now. So I think it's the same. It's going to be the same problem.
I'll just keep Titans for myself.
What?
I'll just keep Titans
for yourself. Yeah, it was actually really interesting when I did the cover for Titans 100, the sort of farewell, and just realizing, like, wow, these characters, it's very possible we won't see those characters again, or not for a very long time. As you can tell, I actually love talking about sort of gender and consumption patterns, mostly, particularly in comics and comic conventions, because I think it's a really sort of important. I tend to think gender, even more than race, is probably one of the most important underlying themes of the way we actually interact with each other, with rules, with law, with society, with entertainment, and so I'm infinitely fascinated by it.
I can go with what he says. I teach 5th grade, and we have,
so does he.
Yeah, and we have a class store, and I always put comics in the store, and it always goes interesting. The girls in my class actually buy more of the comics from my class store than the boys do, and they're looking for Batman and Spider-Man. And I think it's like what you said. They're not afraid to look at a boys comic, but if I put an issue of Wonder Woman in there, their boys will put that one to the side.
Right. Because Wonder Woman's stupid.
Wonder Woman's
but
great.
Batman's awesome. Well, which it goes into another interesting, I think, a whole idea of the other and normalcy. And in our society, being male is normal and being female is not. That female is the other. So we are taught that male imagery is normal, that you should want that, you should desire that, you should desire to be like that. So it's not unusual, I think, to see girls flock to that stuff. Harder to get boys, and I'm always amazed that they do it. I'm always amazed that boys will read Wonder Woman, will read Supergirl, will invest in that stuff. So because when they do it and they fall in love with it, it thrills me because it means they're defying gender norms. And for whatever reason or however they're doing that, you know, I want to see more of that.
I'm curious, have you seen that change, like within the recent years now that more people are out of the closet, should I say, like, as far as gender goes, like, even men, I think, are a lot more open to their femininity than I've ever, me in the dating realm, forget it, George, like, I feel like I'm more masculine than they are sometimes.
Well, this because, that becomes really interesting, because it's not that I think it doesn't exist, it's not that I think it doesn't change, but I think in terms of marketing entertainment, I think a lot of the same rules apply. And so, for example, we might have talked about this yesterday, when I was in LA talking to some friends about marketing a project, and they were saying that female-driven project, and the hardest part about that is not that there aren't people that would watch it, but it's that people that design ancillary product, clothing, books, etc., they don't think, like, when they're selling to Walmart, the Walmart people don't want it. Which isn't to say Walmart consumers won't, but it's the buyers have decided they're not interested. So I actually think the problem lies not necessarily so much with consumers, but what a few small people are teaching consumers. And so, do I think it's changing? Absolutely. Do I think it's changing fast enough? Absolutely not. And again, I think one of the beauties of the internet, for example, is the way that people can be exposed to a wide variety of types and shapes and sort of gender possibilities, blah, blah, blah. I think comic conventions are fantastic for that. An interesting statistic I found in doing video game development was that the one place, this is getting very gender bending, so don't take this to school, was that boys, it's the one place where boys dress up like girls all the time. But boys play Lara Croft, like they become Lara Croft in video games. Yeah. It's fascinating to me how they will embody female characters in video games, even though they would never do it in their real lives, or they would never admit to it in their real lives. But that, in the virtual realm, I'm amazed at the amount of ways that young women will play male characters and young men will play female characters with no thought about it. Because that's a safe fantasy realm that's so distant from their daily ways of living and daily ways of consuming. And what we're really talking about, again, is it's not just entertainment, it's selling it. Comic books exist to sell advertising space. The artwork is like a fantastic byproduct of that. But if they can't sell the advertising space, then the comics don't matter, and unfortunately. And so that's where, I think that's where we all have to decide, like, when I say we all, creators, struggle with what to put out there. Because I think a lot of us would put out different material if we believe the advertisers would pay for it.
I just wanted to say something stemming off of what this man said about Wonder Woman comic books. In every other type of entertainment, it seems that the badass chick or the tough chick or the rough chick is really, you know, it's someone who's out of reach, and all the guys want to be around that chick. They all go to see the Lara Croft movies. You know, they go, any woman who is wielding a gun and can drop you with one punch, you know, that she's hot. But Wonder Woman is even more aggressive than Batman would be, and she has different values than he does. If anything, I would expect the guys who, you know, want to see the violence and someone get their butts kicked, they would be going towards Wonder Woman more than Batman because of her value system. But
here's the thing I also argue with Wonder Woman, is Wonder Woman is not a hypersexualized character, i.e. she's not an easily obtainable sex object for men. Lara Croft, I think guys can be like, oh, I could get her. No, I mean, I'm just saying in guy fantasy, and I'm talking again generally. Any Catwoman, a chick in a hot cat suit, I think the fantasy, I could get that. Wonder Woman doesn't have that, in that most guys I know, I've spoken to or I've read about, don't actively think that if she were real, they could actually obtain her. And therefore, I think she's less desirable. And the other thing is, I would